So in my last video, I discussed the top 5 things I was worried about going into the Edge of Fate. And thank you guys for that. That video was very well received. I'm always worried when I put out a more negative video. I never want it to spiral out of control and then people just be like, Skarrow said it sucks, blah, blah, blah. Really, that video spawned a lot of genuinely really great discussion, which I think is always the goal and something that I'm very thankful for. So if you're interested in watching that video, I'll have a link down below. But in this video, I want to kind of flip the script and talk about the things I am most excited for going into the Edge of Fate, the Year of Prophecy as a whole, you know, Renegades, and then kind of the future of Destiny. Because a lot of these points have to do a lot with Bungie's changing philosophies and perspectives going into what Destiny is and expanding on that because it's been a decade and things obviously need to change. So that kind of leads us into my first point. One of the things that I'm most excited for is Bungie seems dead set on really pushing for unique experiences and redefining what is like an acceptable or new Destiny experience or activity or campaign, whatever you want to say. So I would say from between Shadowkeep and Lightfall, really going up until the final shape, Destiny became very predictable. And there were high and low points of that, of course, but generally between those, you know, 3-4 years, every time a season came out, you knew generally what was going to be there, even without marketing. Every time a campaign or a DLC came out, you knew generally what was going to be in it. You know, you knew the approximate length of the campaign. You could guess a lot of the story beats. You knew the length of the raid and, you know, how many strikes or how many exotics or a seasonal story, how that was going to unfold, when you were going to get exotics, that sort of thing. That's very boring. When you define an experience and it becomes that predictable, especially for a game that's a decade old, that becomes incredibly boring. And so I think over the last year, Bungie has done their best to really kind of push that and push for more unique experiences. So for example, Pantheon, I mean, completely different than anything we'd ever gotten. Dual Destiny, Excision, the heavy metal game mode, how the exotic mission was kind of presented and unraveled over Heresy. So we got it very early on in the season, and then you got to kind of iterate and unlock new things for the exotic as the season unfolded and you solved more secrets and that sort of thing. So obviously nothing like completely genre bending necessarily yet. Although I think you could argue things like the Nether or Coil were approaching that for sure. But I think these things sort of show Bungie's philosophy or mentality going forward, where they really want to push our expectations and make things less predictable, which I think is, of course, a very good thing. So if you look at the Edge of Fate, very kind of confusing, mysterious narrative going forward. They're playing their cards super close to their chest, which is something they haven't done in a very long time. It's very nice to see. A huge, expansive, kind of intertwining, confusing patrol space, a non-linear campaign with a bunch of sub-stories that you can do in any order, a bunch of secrets and mysteries to solve. So you can see that this piece of content is very themed, and they want it to have an identity of secrets and mysteries and having to kind of theory craft and put things together, which I think is really cool. And then you go into something like the next expansion, Renegades. Clearly with the Star Wars theming, they're going for a different, very, very different tone and feel there. And hopefully that is reflected in activities and what we are actually playing in the game as well. And so I hope they continue to push for these more unique experiences and mix genres and talk about like what they think is acceptable for Destiny. And I think that is cool. The more that we can kind of absorb and change and become less predictable, the more fun the game is. And you might not like everything. There are plenty of activities that I know people don't like, and maybe I wasn't the hugest fan of. Not everyone might do something like Pantheon. Not everyone might like the heavy metal game mode, but I think it is objectively a good thing that they are like pushing their comfort zone and starting to mess with more unique experiences, because that means that when an activity does hit for you, it probably hits like way harder, which I think is cool. The second thing ties sort of into that. I want to talk about how excited I am that the mystery is finally coming back to Destiny. It's been a long time. I would say mystery was sort of the main vibe of a lot of Destiny 1 and maybe like very early Destiny 2 with Callus, really. Very quickly, I would say Forsaken on, the mystery really fell off. It was no longer really a surprise when something happened, with a couple of exceptions like Savathûn getting the light and Witch Queen. But for the most part, there was no surprise. There's been no mystery. It's been very kind of predictable, and the lore's been good for a lot of Destiny, but it hasn't really been jaw-dropping or like I said, like mysterious. And I think I really like that they're bringing that aspect back into the game by focusing on the 9. I have no idea what the hell is going to happen in Edge of Fate, and I've played a couple of the missions. No one seems to really have a great idea of where this is going, and I think that's very exciting because we can start talking about our different theories and stuff, which I think is cool. And then they're also bringing back mystery to the actual like game experience as well. So there was, you know, post Corridors of Time, a number of years where we didn't really get in-game puzzles anymore. There's a couple small ones scattered throughout there. A couple of the collector's editions had ARGs, Embaru engines, stuff like that, but very small. Finally, with Chestiny, we're back. They're doing huge community puzzles again. They, of course, just did the Marathon ARGs as well. And so it seems like there's been kind of a mentality shift within Bungie where they like these things again, which is super great. And then there's like, of course, the in-game puzzle aspect of Edge of Fate, where they're really pushing for the kind of secret solving and puzzle secret hunting and puzzle solving aspect of it, and really just making the world more mysterious in terms of how you interact with the gameplay. I think things like the Nether did a really good job of this as well, where there were a number of secrets that unfolded over a series of months. And I think that's awesome. So I hope they keep doing that. That's, of course, like, I'm a little biased. That's one of my favorite things about this franchise and video games as a whole. But I really hope they continue to hone in on it in a way where if you're excited about mystery and you want to get involved, everyone feels empowered to do so. But if you don't really care, then you could just watch a YouTube guide and catch up a little bit later. So I think they're doing a great job pushing in this direction, and I hope they keep it up because at least in my community, the response has been great over the past 3 or 4 months, I would say. The portal. I think the portal, minus the things we talked about last week, is really genuinely awesome. And I think it's going to be doing a lot of great things for the game. Rotating activities season to season. So we know Savathûn Spire is going to be in there. We know Wrathborn Hunts are going to be in there. We know the Coil at some point is going to be coming in or out. Talking to the devs, it seems like they don't want activities to ever be sunset forever anymore. Their intention is every so often, and we don't know if this is every like 3 months, every 6 months, whatever. I'm sure they'll talk about it more. But every few months, every few updates, things rotate in and out of the portal. So, you know, Savathûn Spire, I believe, is going to be a playable activity within Edge of Fate. But maybe in 3 months with the new seasonal drop, Fire and Ash, maybe that goes away and we get the Coil back. Or maybe that goes away and the Nether comes back, or something like that. And I think this is going to be a really great way to not have everything in the game at once, to try to make things a little less overwhelming for newer returning players, and you know, whatever the stress is on the servers or the back end, I don't really know. But make sure that these activities are not lost content forever. And I really like the idea of, okay, hey, we're having new activities coming in, but also if you want to revisit like Forges, or you want to revisit potentially the Menagerie in the future or whatever, we redid those activities and now they're in the portal for a couple of months. I think that's a really cool idea. I also really like the idea of, you know, focused light grinding. While I'm not a huge fan of light level grinding, I like the idea that, hey, we're going to push you to do these other activities because this activity is offering this weapon that you might really want to farm, or this activity is offering boots and bonus engrams and that sort of thing. So it seems like the portal is going to be a really great way to introduce a lot more activity diversity in terms of like activities that actually are meaningful to run, targeted focusing of specific loot that you want to farm, and then that loot incentive is also going to get you as an individual player to engage in a lot of different activities, which I think is really cool. And I think the way that they're implementing the portal for the most part is genuinely a great idea. And I'm really excited to see how they take our feedback and continue to improve it. But so far, hypothetically, obviously I haven't really played much with the portal. It seems like a great idea and I'm excited for it. The fourth thing I'm really excited for is the introduction of more grind, but before half of you freak out, not at the expense of players who don't want to. I think a lot of what they are doing with the portal, with the new light system, with the new difficulty system, with the tier 3 or the tier 5 weapons and armor system, they are making it so you can complete most of the game on whatever difficulty you want. You can do things like the raid only using tier 3 weapons and tier 3 armor if you only want to grind up to that difficulty, or you only want to put that much time into the game, and that's perfectly fine. You'll still experience 90%, 95% of what the game has to offer. But for players like myself, who have this more hobby slant to Destiny, and we're always looking for more things to grind and more things to do and ways to push ourselves in terms of skill expression and loot expression and that sort of thing, I love the fact that they're adding these deep grinds that aren't that much better or different than what most people will experience. But if you want that true 10 out of 10 armor or weapon combination, you're gonna have to push yourself a little harder. You're gonna have to play a little bit more. And I think that's very exciting. There's also things like shiny weapons that they've been doing, which I personally love. It'll get you, or at least it'll get me, to engage more with things like the Arms Week activity to farm out weapons that I probably normally wouldn't farm. Hopefully they add some of that sort of stuff to the Epic Raid as well. We'll have to wait and see. But I just think that's very exciting. I really feel like they are approaching this sort of middle ground where finally they'll be able to, at some level, appease any player along the grind spectrum, where it's like, hey, I just want to log in for a couple hours every week and get stuff done. Hey, you'll still be able to get really good gear and complete pretty much everything. But if you really want to push yourself and you want to get the shiny flex loot and you want to do the hardest content in the game, there's content for you as well, which I think is pretty exciting. And I'm interested to see how that evolves, because it's always, these systems, every time they introduce them, they always start very different than when they finish. Crafting, for instance, was very different when it was introduced versus where it is now. Adept weapons, very different when it was introduced than where it is now. I'm excited to see where this sort of thing goes with tier 5 weapons and tier 5 armor and shiny weapons, but we'll just have to wait and see. And then the final thing I'm really excited about, and this is a huge swing by Bungie, but I have a lot of faith because the raid team never misses. I'm very excited for the raid, and I'm especially excited for the epic raid, whatever that is. The raid team has been on an absolutely generational run. Warlord's Ruin, Pantheon, Vesper's Host, or Salvation's Edge, Vesper's Host, Sunder Doctrine. Unreal back-to-back run. Just great experiences, kind of pushing the idea of mechanics within raids and dungeons, what it means to be a raid or a dungeon, the puzzles hidden within raid or dungeons, and the narrative. I think they've been doing an unbelievable job recently, and I cannot wait to see the new raid, especially as they push into things like more unique experiences. How is that reflected in the raid? And then the idea of the epic raid. So if you don't know, the raid's going to launch in July, and then 3 months later, with the launch of Fire and Ash, which is the kind of mid-season update, they are also going to be releasing something called an epic raid. Now, they haven't exactly told us what this is going to have. When they originally teased it 6 months ago or so, they said potentially additional mechanics, potentially an additional encounter, additional loot, additional difficulty, that sort of thing. So it seems like a beefed up master raid that, like a kind of Destiny 1 style hard heroic master raid, whatever the hell they were called back then, where there's actually like major differences and reasons to do it, unlike the master raids that exist right now in Destiny 2, which is you do it once for the title and then you're done. So I'm excited to see what that looks like, especially if it introduces an additional encounter. There's a lot of kind of rumors going around that Salvation's Edge didn't originally have Verity until the delay. And so that's kind of how I'm framing this in my head. Imagine getting Salvation's Edge as a 4 encounter, the first, second, third, and fifth encounter, and then 3 months later, oh, they add Verity and maybe they add some more shiny loot to chase or whatever. I think that's pretty exciting, and I'm definitely here to see what they are looking to deliver. I'm excited to see how they implement it in the game. And I'm just here going into it with a very open mind. So it's obviously, it's no replacement for 2 full raids in a year, but it is part of this more like pushing unique experiences thing that I think we should all be open to. And it's something I can't wait to see what they do with. So let me know what you are most excited for in the Edge of Fate down below. But yeah, that's kind of all I've got to say. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you did, make sure to subscribe, and I'll see you next time. Have a great day.